Okay, this video is on Gilbert Harman's chapter, Ethics and Observation. The page numbers refer to the 4th edition. So Gilbert Harman, last time I checked, is still alive. Very eminent 20th century philosopher. He's now emeritus, which means retired, from Princeton University, a school you may have heard of up in New Jersey. Our selection is from his 1977 book on the nature of morality. Now, Harman is on the anti-realist team. This selection is one of the very important arguments in support of anti-realism. Here's the big question which Harman is trying to answer in this essay. Can moral principles be tested and confirmed in the same way that scientific principles can? I mean, if you could confirm morality in the same way as you could confirm scientific principles, that'd be pretty strong evidence, right? But if you can't, well, that seems like that's a real strike against objective moral principles. I mean, if you can't test them in the scientific way, science is the gold standard, right, for how we know stuff. Well, according to many philosophers. So that would be a big strike against it. Now, Harman's an anti-realist, so he's going to answer this question negatively. His answer is that moral principles cannot be tested and confirmed in the same way that scientific principles can. Although he's going to say, although it's possible to make moral observations, these observations do not provide evidential confirmation for our moral claims. We'll be unpacking that as we go along. You can think of Harman as really addressing the same kind of question as David Hume. Now, Harman and Hume are going to come at this question of observation a little bit differently. They're going to have their differences on the nature of observation, but they're ultimately going to agree that we don't have observational evidence for moral claims. So Hume and Harman disagree about what moral observations are. Hume thinks that there are no such things as moral observations. You can't observe moral facts. Harman thinks you can make moral observations. Hume is wrong about the nature of observation. However, Hume and Harman agree that there is no observational evidence for our moral claims. Now, their disagreement, like I said, is about the nature of observation. In other words, according to Harman, not all moral observations provide evidence for moral theories. In fact, none do. All right, so just to make the contrast clearer, here's what Hume says about moral observations. Hume claims that you can never make anything like a moral observation because you cannot directly perceive with any of your 5 senses moral properties. Here's the famous quote. You take any action allowed to be vicious, willful murder, for instance, examine it in all lights and see if you can find that matter of fact or real existence which you call vice, like the moral badness. The vice entirely escapes you as long as you consider the object. In other words, there are no objective moral facts that somehow inhere in our actions. Harman, however, has a more nuanced view of what an observation is. In the 20th century, philosophers of science developed a more nuanced view of observation. Observation, they said, it involves more than just, having this direct sensation. For example, I'm looking at a computer screen right now. There's more going on there than just light hitting my retina and me being appeared to in a certain way. In order to make an observation statement, in order to have an observational belief, you have to have more than just that direct perception. All observational statements, they said, are theory-laden. That is, I don't just have a sensation and say, well, there's a computer screen in front of me. Instead, I have the concept of what a computer screen is. If I didn't have the concept of what a computer screen is, I would never say, oh, there's a computer screen right in front of me. Even if I was having the same direct perception, I wouldn't say that, because if I have no theory of computer screens, then I'm not going to form that observational belief. So in order to form observational beliefs and have make observational statements, you have to have more than just direct sensory perceptions, they said. You've also got to have a theoretical framework through which you interpret those direct sensory perceptions. So all observations are theory laden. Now Harman is on board with that view of observation, and that's a lot more sophisticated or nuanced than Hume's view of what observations are. So Harman says, look, an observation is an immediate judgment made in response to a situation without any conscious reasoning having taken place. And here's what he means. When I have the visual sensation that I'm having right now of my computer screen, I don't have to think about what is that thing. Because I have this theory of computer screens, as it were, I just make this immediate judgment. There's a computer screen when I have that direct sensory perception. My observation, there's a computer screen, is theory laden. It's a direct perception interpreted through the grid of my theory of computer screens. And the same goes for any other observational belief or observational statement that we make. Okay, that's Harman on observation. So far, we're just talking about observations. We haven't got to the moral part yet. Now, but what happens is that when Harman takes this view of observation and the theory ladenness of observation and applies it to the moral case, things get more complicated and more interesting than Hume thought. It's not enough just to say, I don't have any direct sensory perceptions of moral properties. Well, Harman says, hold your horses, Hume. I mean, observation is more complicated than that. And so what Harman wants to do is compare two kinds of observation statements, observation claims. He wants to compare the scientific kind and the moral kind and say, are these the same kinds of theory confirmation that goes on? When you first look at it, it seems like moral observations could be made and could confirm moral theories in exactly the same way that scientific observations can confirm scientific theories. That's what it looks like at first sight. He's going to come back around and say, actually, no, moral case loses. But at first sight, he wants to say, these two look like they're on a par with each other. Let's look at the scientific case first. He gives us this, this scenario. Let's say you've got a scientist and they are doing an experiment with a cloud chamber, and they see a vapor trail go through this cloud chamber, and they have a certain theory of how protons act in these circumstances. Now, they don't actually directly see the proton. Protons are super small. You can't see them with the naked eye. All they see, their only direct sensory perception, is of a vapor trail that appears in the cloud chamber. But when they interpret that direct sensory perception through the grid of their theory of protons, they make an observation statement. They make an immediate judgment about what's going on there, and they say, there goes a proton. It's an observation statement. It's more than just a direct sensory perception that it's reporting. It's a theoretically interpreted perception. Let's compare that to, the observation that they make confirms the scientist's theory about protons. That observation, that theory-laden observation, in turn confirms their theory because it's what the theory predicted. Now let's compare that with a moral case. Does the same thing happen? Well, it kind of looks like it. Let's imagine a case. Sorry, this is going to be troubling to cat lovers. So let's say that you got someone and they see a cat that's being burned alive by some teenage hoodlums. Terrible thing, in my view. This moral observer sees that event. Now, they don't directly see the moral property. They don't have a direct sensory perception of badness, of wrongness. Harman agrees with Hume on that so far. They don't have a direct sensory perception. But they do have a direct sensory perception of this cat burning and all that involves. And they have a theory in their head about what makes something right and wrong. And their theory, maybe it's something like causing needless suffering is wrong. Well, given that theory that's in their head, when they make that observation, they make an immediate judgment which doesn't require any conscious reasoning, and the judgment is that is wrong. Okay. It seems like the same kind of thing is going on in the scientific case and in the moral case. There's more going on than just direct sensory perception. They're both making observation statements about something that they don't have a direct sensory perception of, but it's a theory-laden observation. And in the moral case, like in the scientific case, that observation is supposedly confirming the moral principle that needless harm is wrong. It's confirming the moral theory that they have. Now, I wish I had, this is where I really need a whiteboard, so I could draw pictures of the proton, the vapor trail, and like the burning cat. It would be more fun that way. I don't, I'm sorry. I'll do it in class. So far forth, it looks like, hey, these cases work the exact same way. Once you acknowledge that all observation is theory-laden, it looks like the scientists and the moralists are doing the exact same thing. And that seems to bode well for the confirmation of our moral theories. In other words, there's some similarities. Both scientists and moralists are making an observation. That is, they are making an immediate judgment in response to a situation without any conscious reasoning having taken place. Both those observations are theory-laden. The scientist doesn't have direct physical sensation of the proton. The moralist doesn't have a direct physical sensation of the wrongness. Both those observations are applying a previously acquired theoretical framework to the direct visual appearances. So far, so good for morality. However, Harman now wants to point out crucial differences between the evidential value of moral and scientific observations. And the difference hinges on this crucial principle which Harman has, which tells us how observations confirm theories. Here's the principle. He says an observation confirms a theory only to the extent that the truth of the observation is the best explanation of why the observation was made. If an observation confirms a theory, then the best explanation for why the observer made that observation is that it's true. Okay. Let me give you an example here. Let's say you hold up your hand in front of your face. When I hold up my hand in front of my face, I observe that I have 5 fingers on my right hand. Now, why do I make that observation? Why do I form that belief in response to my direct sensory perception of my right hand? Well, probably the best explanation for why I made that observation is that it's true. I really have 5 fingers on my right hand. I really saw them. The light hit my retina, sent a signal to my brain, and I formed a belief which was caused by the actual fact that it represents. Now, of course, it's hypothetically possible that I don't have a right hand and it doesn't have 5 fingers on it, but that I'm being deceived by an evil demon who makes me think that I've got 5 fingers on my right hand. Possible. It's possible that I'm in the Matrix and my real hand was blown off in the war, but whoever runs the Matrix is making me have the sensory perception. Okay, maybe that's possible. But the best, most likely explanation for why I made that observation statement is that it's true. Okay, so my observation that I got 5 fingers on my right hand confirms my theory about the way hands work with human beings. Okay. So scientific observations confirm theories on this view. Here's how they work. The best explanation for most scientific observations is that the theoretical framework that they are presupposing is correct. For example, the best explanation available for why I observed the proton, the scientists, say I'm not scientist, the best explanation for why they said, hey, there's a proton, is that there really is a proton in the cloud chamber, which acts in the ways that I think protons act. So far forth, scientific observations meet Harman's principle. The best explanation of the observation involves more than just the scientist's psychology. It also involves the external world. In other words, the best explanation for why the scientist said there's a proton involves more than just this person has a fetish about saying there's a proton. It involves the fact that in the external world there is a proton and that their observations are responsive to those. Harman now wants to say moral observations don't confirm theories, though, if we're using this criterion. They don't work the same way as scientific theories and observations. All right. He says the best explanation of why you made this observation statement, that act of cat burning is wrong. The best explanation of why you said that is not that it's actually true objectively that causing needless suffering is wrong. Instead, the best explanation for why you made that observation is simply and exclusively that you believe that causing needless suffering is wrong. In other words, we can fully and sufficiently explain why you made your observation statement purely in terms of your psychology and not in terms of anything that actually obtains out in the real world. Let me explain this further, okay? First of all, let's back up and think about how physical facts cause beliefs. Physical facts seem to have causal effects on our perceptual apparatus. Now, by our perceptual apparatus, I just mean all the things that go into letting you make a perception, you know, like your sensory organs and your nervous system and all of that. It seems like, for example, when that proton moves, that's a physical fact, right? It causes a vapor trail to occur in the cloud chamber. That vapor trail causes light to go to your retina, which sends nerve impulses to your brain, a brain which believes a certain proton theory. And that nerve impulse produces an observational judgment. There goes a proton. In other words, there's a causal chain between this physical fact, the proton moved, and the observational judgment. There goes a proton. Moral facts, says Harman, don't work the same way. It seems like moral facts don't cause anything to happen at all, if there are such things. Let's try to think about a parallel causal chain from the supposed moral facts in the world to anything. Look, let's say that, let's just, for the sake of argument, let's assume that it's wrong that cats should suffer and be burned. Okay, I don't know what that fact looks like or something, but could that moral fact send light to my retina? Could it send a nerve impulse to my brain? How would that work? What laws of physics do moral facts follow? How do they cause my perceptual apparatus to do anything? How do they cause anything to happen in my brain? Harman says the whole question is nonsense. Moral facts, whatever you might imagine them to be, are not physical facts. And since they're not physical facts, they don't cause anything to happen in the world. Only physical facts cause stuff to happen in the real physical world where people make observation statements. So there is no possible causal role that a moral fact could play in explaining why you made your observation statement, right? Let's think about what is the causal explanation for your moral judgments. Well, it must go something like this. And the most plausible explanation for why you made an observational judgment that cat burning is wrong is like this. Okay, you saw a physical event, a cat was burning. That sent light to your retina. That sent nerve impulses to your brain, which held a certain moral theory. And that spit out an observational judgment. Cat burning is wrong. Here's the important thing to notice, though, about this causal chain. There are no moral facts in it. Cat burning is in there at the end of the chain. But cat burning per se is not a moral fact. It's just a physical event with no moral characteristics. The supposed morality of this event played no role in sending light to your retina or nerve impulses to your brain. It is not part of the best explanation for why you made that observational judgment. And in that respect, it's completely different from the role that protons play in producing observational judgments in the scientist. All right, back up. Here's Harman's basic argument. All right. It all hinges on the idea that only physical facts have physical, effects in the world. So premise one is this. If moral facts have causal effects, then they would have to be physical facts. But premise two, plainly, moral facts are not physical facts. Therefore, moral facts, if there are any, have no causal effects in the world. And therefore, no moral belief is caused by the fact that it asserts. Stop right there. Premise 4 is saying your belief that cat burning is wrong is not caused by the fact that cat burning is wrong. That's what it's saying. Well, premise 5, if a moral belief is justified, then it is caused by the fact that it asserts. That goes back to Harman's crucial principle that an observation theory only to the extent that the observation is produced by the best explanation for why the observation was made was that the observation is true. And it follows from that therefore moral beliefs are not justified. Okay, wait. Now, if you're checked out and you got lost like 5-10 minutes ago, come back to me right now. This is the even simpler version. Bottom line, listen to me. Premise 1, if an observation confirms a theory, then the truth of the observation is the best explanation for why the observation was made. Premise 2, the truth of moral observations is not the best explanation for why they are made. Therefore, it follows by modus tollens, moral observations do not confirm our moral theories. Now, why does Harman believe premise 2? Why does he believe that the truth of moral observations is not the best explanation for why they are made? Because he thinks moral facts don't cause anything to happen, since they're not physical facts. Our moral beliefs are best explained, says Harman, merely by our psychology, our sociology, the way our brain is wired and the way we were brought up, but not by objective moral facts that somehow impacted our minds. Okay, that is the core of his argument. Now, pause right here. If you wanted to fight with Harman, here's a couple ways you might. You could fight with premise 1 here, right? You could say, wait a minute, his theory of theory confirmation is wrong. Premise 1 expresses his belief about how theories are confirmed. And maybe he's just wrong about how theories get confirmed. Maybe you've got a better story to tell about how observation relates to theory confirmation. So you could fight with premise 1, his general epistemology, his theory of knowledge. You could fight with premise 2. In premise 2, he says, the truth of moral observations is not the best explanation for why we make them. And that's based on his view of that moral facts don't cause anything, since only physical facts cause things. Well, you might say, you might fight with that one. How might you fight with that? Well, maybe you think that moral facts are physical. I don't know how that would work, or how you would find them or measure them, but you could go that way. Or you might think, wait a minute, non-physical facts can cause physical events to happen. For example, some people believe that there are non-physical entities like spirits. By spirits, I don't just mean ghosts, although of course people believe in that too. But some people think that we have a non-physical soul that is distinct from, but connected to our bodies, and that my soul impacts what my body does. Some people think that there are spirits like God or angels that make things happen in the physical world, or demons. Now, maybe moral facts are kind of like that. I don't know. But maybe you've got a theory. Maybe you don't have a physicalist view of the world. Maybe you're not a materialist and you think, wait, there are non-physical facts that impact our physical world. And maybe moral facts are among them. Maybe that's a story you could tell. Anyway, I'm just like throwing out ways you might think about this argument. You might have your own views on all that. Here's another objection. Okay, somebody might say, hey, look. Harmon, your theory, your view of theory confirmation has to be wrong, because if it's right, then it seems like it would eliminate math too. Okay, here's how this goes. It seems like there's no direct observational confirmation for mathematics. We don't observe numbers or mathematical facts like 5 + 7 = 12. Now, we might observe, I can count apples, right? And say, hey, look, there's 3 apples. There's like 100 books on my shelf. I can do all that. I can see physically the numbers on my screen. But that's different than seeing the number 3. You see 3 books. You don't see 3 nests, 3 itself. You see these Arabic numerals written on the screen. You don't see 5 itself. I mean, 5 can be written with Roman numerals too, and it would look totally different. The point is, like, what you see is not the number, it's a symbol for it. Okay, now if there's no direct observational confirmation for math, but our knowledge of math, that's like the gold standard, right? Well, if there's no direct observational confirmation for math, then maybe we don't need direct observational confirmation for our theories. Maybe it doesn't matter that there's no direct observational confirmation for morality. I can't see wrongness. I can't see 5 either, but I believe in it, and so does Harmon, right? Harmon says, okay, yeah, you're right. There's no direct observational confirmation for math. But math does have a kind of observational confirmation that morality doesn't have. And that's what makes math in a totally different category than morality. There is indirect observational support for mathematics. He says, in explaining the observations that support a physical theory, scientists typically appeal to mathematical principles. So when scientists make their empirical theories, they have to use numbers and they use math. They have to use them, and that gives a kind of indirect support to math, he thinks. However, there doesn't seem to be even indirect observational evidence for moral principles. We don't need moral principles to explain any of our observations, says Harmon. So morality lacks this indirect observational support that math has. So what's the upshot what's the conclusion for Harmon? The conclusion is there is no scientific observational support for morality, and therefore for moral facts, and therefore we have no reason to believe that there are such things as moral facts. Anti-realism is the case. So says Harmon. You think about it.